Welcome to the 2025 K-State Garden Hour webinar series. We're so glad that you're here. This webinar series started in 2020 and has been a collaboration of the entire K-State Horticulture Extension team. Since the start of the program, we've reached over 83,000 gardeners just like you. We're pleased to continue offering the K-State Garden Hour series for free. If you've enjoyed these educational webinars, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to support this program. The link to donate can be found in the chat or on our K-State Garden Hour website. The webinar is hosted by K-State Research and Extension. My name is Laura Phillips, and I'm the Horticulture Agent for the Meadowlark District, which covers Jackson, Jefferson, and Nemaha counties. Everyone involved in the development of this series is an extension professional for K-State. Most of us have a background in horticultural education or a related discipline, but most of all, we each have a love for educating and sharing important topics with gardeners. Now, before we get started, we have a couple housekeeping notes to cover. First, please use the Q&A feature for questions related to the presentation. This is where we look for the questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. You should see a button along the bottom tab that says Q&A. Just click on that and you'll be able to enter your question. Today's webinar will be recorded. We'll post it to our K-State Garden Hour website. We typically upload additional resources related to the topic as well. If we have links that we share through the chat, we will also link those on our website. Our website is also where you can access previous topics and see upcoming topics in the series. Today, our moderators are Sharon Ashworth and Pamela Paulson. They will help be sharing information through the chat during the presentation. They will also help facilitate the Q&A portion of the webinar. Now, today's topic is native and ornamental grasses in Kansas. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Markis Hill. Please give us a few moments while we transition and share the presentation slides.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Markis Hill. I am the Johnson County Horticulture Agent for ornamentals and turf, and I'm here to talk about ornamental grasses and native grasses and how to use them in the landscape. I am looking at the poll right now, the welcome poll. I'm just going to go ahead and end the poll, and we're going to go over the answers a little bit. So the first question was, which of the following is not a landscape benefit for native grasses or ornamental grasses? And that was going to be that they contribute to erosion. They do not contribute to erosion. If you're using them correctly, they will actually prevent a lot of your erosion problems. The second one, when is the best time to cut back most of our native and ornamental grasses in Kansas? And that's going to be late winter and early spring. And the key word in that question is most. Of course, there's always some exceptions to the rule. And I'll sort of explain a little bit of that as we go through the presentation. The last question, okay, so this was sort of all over the place. Which of the following is not considered best practices in planting native and ornamental grasses? We have choose the right grass for the right site. Right plant, right place is always a good recommendation for any plant. It doesn't matter if it's grass or not. Consider sun exposure and water and soil type. That's always best practice. Planting deep. You do not want to plant our grasses too deep. Their meristems could get covered up, and you could sort of have some failure if you are working with some perennial grasses. The next one, plant in early spring or early plant in spring or early fall. Yes, you would want to do that. It depends on what type of grass. Of course, there's, like I said, there's always some exceptions to the rule. Prepare the soil to improve drainage. Yes, you would want to prepare the soil to improve drainage. And of course, again, exceptions to the rule. Some grasses really like it wet feet. And we'll sort of cover that in the presentation. Reduce watering during establishment. You actually want to have fairly regular water, about an inch a week, when you're establishing some perennial grasses. And that will sort of increase your success rate. space plants properly and give each plant enough room to grow to its full size. This is very important, especially if you're working with mixed plantings. But if you're sort of going with a mass prairie look, maybe you want to put it a little closer together. If you have grasses that flop over, maybe you want to add some support by planting something really close to it. And we'll take a look at some of that stuff. Okay, so, all right, so let's go through this. So, all right. So a couple learning objectives with my presentation today. Why you should use ornamental grasses in the landscape. There's many reasons. There's many uses of you can do it. So we'll cover some of those. Types of ornamental grasses, not all of them are the same. There's so many to choose from. There's so many shapes, colors, and forms, and we'll cover a little bit of that. Yeah, how to use grasses in the landscape. Some maintenance requirements that you will need to take into consideration when working with ornamental grasses. We'll go over a couple specific grasses, and I mean a short couple. If you don't see your favorite grass on there, I'm sorry, but we do have some information that we'll be linking into the chat of how of some specific recommendations for Kansas. If you are in a different area, I would look up in your own local extension about some specific recommendations. And then native grasses and their benefit. I'm a big native advocate. As we go through, we'll sort of see the benefits of native grasses, and I will mention them throughout. So why use grasses? We're going to start with aesthetics. They are used primarily to like break up a lot of our broadleaf textures in the landscape. And they come in like vertical forms, a lot of different shapes and colors. And that sort of allows us to differentiate from some of our mass plantings of say petunias, or we got coleus in here in this picture. And it offers a very soft texture. We have fall and winter interests. That is going to be true because a lot of our perennial grasses, at least, hold on to their foliage during the winter, and will it be very visible, let's say in a snow. And so they'll stand up above the snow, and it will offer us something to look at if you don't want to just see white and barren wasteland in some of our snowstorms. And then interesting flower heads. This is definitely true of a lot of our ornamental grasses. That's pretty much one of the biggest appeals of our ornamental grasses is how different their flower heads are. They'll have definitely different highlights, each one of them. Some of them have like red anthers, and some of them will just have highlighted yellow anthers, and we'll take a look at some of that too as we go on. Okay. So why use grasses? They're tough plants. I don't know one that is not a tough plant, and they can handle a wide range of soil conditions. They need little to no fertilizer. And of course, there's an asterisk by that, because if you're using annual grasses, and you keep removing the whole plant at the end of the season, you're sort of depleting a little bit of some of the nutrients that are vital to grass success. But they are tolerant of many diseases and pests. Of course, we all know that many of our native grasses are food for herbivores, such as the bison that roamed here, and some of our cattle on our pasture land. But they, even with grazing, they still seem to thrive and work past that. They do well with the natural rainfall. So like I said before, you would want to have regular water when you're establishing a new perennial grass. But once it's established, I mean, you can sort of take the irrigation away. It should be able to handle just the natural rainfall on its own. And they're generally low maintenance. This is definitely a general This is definitely generally speaking, as we would say. And that's because some of our grasses, you might have to keep contained more. You might have to be able to divide them more often than, say, some of our just regular forbs and flowers that we have in our landscape. And so I would like to explain this picture. This picture is of Miscanthus or maidenhair grass. And we dug it up for division. That's one of our maintenance requirements for one of these ornamental grasses. And we set it out for all of our volunteers to maybe take along with them. But it didn't go anywhere. Nobody wanted it. So it got put into the debris pile. And I took this picture last week. It's still alive, still thriving, still green, and I could pluck this out of the debris pile some 2 months later and go plant it in my yard, and it would still thrive. So let's go over some of the types of ornamental grasses. So let's start with first by life cycle. So of course we have our annuals. This is purple fountain grass. It is a zone 8 plant. And so here in Kansas, we treat it as an annual because of those attractive flower heads. And this comes in several shapes and forms. So that's why we use it here. We have our cool season perennials. This is river oats pushing through some mulch that's a little bit compacted because it's a tough plant. And this is actually started growing in like late March. It was still growing through some of the freezes that we were having, and it's what we would consider a cool season perennial. We have our warm season perennials. So this is switchgrass, and you'll start to see this really take off, as the temperatures get consistently hotter, the soil temperatures become a little bit hotter, and this is when it sort of starts to take off. And then another way we can classify grasses is by growth habit. So it can come in a tufted growth habit. So this is some blue grama or just blue grama grass or eyelash grass, if you've ever heard it called that. And it grows in little tufts, especially when we use it as an ornamental interest. It can come in a mounded form. So this is prairie dropseed, and it sort of flops over on itself, and that's what we'd sort of consider mounded. Upright, this is our feather reed grass. If you've ever heard of feather reed grass, I'm sure you've seen feather reed grass because it's widely used everywhere. And then it kind of stays upright, and that's again one of the appeals of this grass. We have a arching habit. This is perennial fountain grass at Chicago Botanical Gardens and the Waterfall Garden. And as you can see, again, with that texture, it just really arches over the interest of and takes your eye to that focal point of the water. And then we have upright arching. So this is Miscanthus, maidenhair grass. And once it grows tall, some of the leaves sort of arch over and gives it a little bit of a vase shape. And that is quite appealing for if you're trying to really, again, break up some of those broadleaf textures. So how to use it in the landscape? Like I said before, you can mass them together. This is our river oats outside of my office. This should just be one bed of river oats. And as you can see, it almost looks like a lawn, but once you step into it, it goes all the way up to your waist. And that is really appealing, and there's no gaps, and that's something that us humans really like in a design, where there's no gaps and it feels all really lush. Then we go to maybe a screening option. This is giant reed grass, and as you can see, you can't see past it. And that is some of our grasses do grow tall enough that it can hide maybe an unattractive feature of your house or provide a screen so that people in your backyard can't see over your fence. And that's why a great use of ornamental grasses. And then, of course, background and foreground. Um, this is a couple of grasses that are used to sort of, again, highlight some of that focal point. The focal point being the colorfulness of our canna lilies that are right there. And again, it just sort of, you can't see the bottom of the canna lilies. And then once you get to the top of the canna lilies, you see something that you can't see past that. And that's, again, that's a really great design element that we can use in our landscape. And then, of course, make interplantings. This is in Denver Botanical Gardens. And of course, there are several different types of grasses. They all have different forms. But again, using that to break up some of this broadleaf textures, providing a lot of separation. And this is a great use of ornamental grasses in landscape. Edge plantings. This is outside of ag innovation. It's prairie drop seed, and we are using it again to there's for some reason they put a little hell strip of soil in front of this wall. I didn't design this. But they needed something to go there, and so they went with small ornamental grasses. But using this sort of element, you can see why we put them in maybe medians on the roads, is because they really work well when they're planted in a line, and especially some of the forms don't really get that large. So we can sort of keep them contained right there. And then, of course, this is a little bit well, I don't know how well known everybody is with some ornamental grass being used as turf. So this is I highlighted this because this is blue grama trials in Minnesota University. They were using it as turf, and so you can see sort of here the blue grama, buffalo grass, and then a 50-50 mix. If you've ever been to Western Kansas or the shortgrass prairie of Eastern Colorado, you would be familiar with that, this is what the grassland sort of looks like out there. Of course, less managed. But if we were to mow the seed heads off, the blue grama and the buffalo grass, it does become attractive turf and a bit more resilient in the summertime. So if you did go with this sort of idea with the native grasses being a turf option, uh, you're sort of sacrificing the fact that these are warm season grasses, and you wouldn't have necessarily the green grass in the fall or the springtime when everything else is greening up. These kind of look a little bit unattractive, but they have added benefit because you don't necessarily need to water them a whole bunch. And especially in the hot of the summer in Kansas, they'll still be green and lush when maybe your neighbors is still using their irrigation constantly. Sensory gardens. This is my little boy in Chicago Botanical Gardens. It just ha so happened that I pushed the stroller too close to the grass, but he felt like he needed to touch it. But that is one of the biggest appeals, in my opinion, for having grasses in your landscape is because the movement and the softness of the textures really is something that appeals to your senses. If you've ever been in maybe a wheat field and seen the wind rush over the wheat in sort of like a wave, it's very cool. If you haven't, you need to go stand in a wheat field on a windy day. But yes, a lot of our grasses are very soft, especially the seed heads, and they make an excellent addition to a sensory garden. And then, of course, rain gardens. This is prairie cordgrass that's under probably 6 to 8 inches of water. This was taken yesterday. I thought this would be an excellent, excellent photo because it's again, it's underwater. It's being used as a rain garden. There's several other pictures I have of the rain gardens around our office. And this is sort of to catch all the runoff of the parking lot and sort of maybe allow the water to sort of infiltrate the soil rather than run down the drain and carry a lot of debris. Yeah, there's a lot of debris that comes from the parking lot that gets caught by a lot of these grasses, and that's it's great for if you want to keep your water quality high, especially around your around if you have ponds nearby. This would be a perfect thing to put as a way to slow some of that water down. And then the inverse of having it flooded is they are really great at being dry. So this is some water-wise landscaping. You probably heard it called xeriscaping. I know that our friends in Hayes call it water smart landscaping. And this is the idea that they don't really need a lot of water once they're established. And so you see maybe a bit of drip irrigation on the right-hand side there. And they would only really turn that on in maybe like if your grass was really wilting. And if your grass is really wilting, I mean, everything else is in trouble. You you probably need to move if your ornamental grass is melting or wilting. But this is, yeah, two great examples of how to use ornamental grasses in a drier landscape. And then let's go to maintenance. So one thing that you will need to consider especially in a residential landscape, is cutting back the foliage, especially in late winter, early spring. And that goes for a lot of our cool season and warm season grasses, depending on the effect that you want. And right here is outside of the Mike Goss tennis court in Manhattan, Kansas, on our K-State campus. This was some miscanthus grass that I cut back. Yeah, you want to leave a little bit of a tuft. You can go all the way to the soil line, sure. I've seen some people say that I like to keep a little bit above. It provides a little bit of structure, especially if you have some grass that likes to flop over. Some of these dry stalks will allow that more of it to stand up. But when you do this, maybe you've seen this if you're an avid landscaper, there's some center dieback. And so this is a picture of miscanthus grass that had some dieback in the center. You see that the leftover leaves and stalks of the flower that are there. And this is what I'm saying, like you can leave some of that, sure. And that will like provide a little bit of structure to the center growth. But if you are familiar with if you're familiar with the makeup of potting soil, it's pretty much non-decomposed grass. And so when you have sort of this dead grass in the middle of it, you're having dead material inside of a grass that maybe gets wet. It harbors some disease, maybe some of the saprophytes, saprophytic fungi will sort of really take off in here. You don't want necessarily to have mushrooms or to really have powdery mildew on some of your grasses, especially our ornamental grasses that are more susceptible to those diseases. But so I would and then you're also giving room for weeds because, like I said, the potting soil is non-decomposed grass. This is non-decomposed grass. So when it's wet, there's seed head falls in there. You are going to have a ripe environment for germination for some of maybe the weedy tree species. Here, let's go to, and so in this picture, I actually went through after I cut them all back, and I went through with a rake. I tried to get a lot of this dead material out of here. And it's just a little bit of rake, and you see that not all of them are easily removed. And you just need to take a little rake it a couple of times, and it will allow for that dead material to sort of break up, and it gives some of the interior meristems a chance for light. Because when you leave that there, it sort of blocks some of the light and blocks some of the center um from really getting that light and taking off in the springtime. And so it's best to go through and rake, just rake it out after you sheared it down. And if you've ever been in Manhattan and seen these lace bark elms, which are everywhere, they drop a lot of seed. And so there were so many when I was doing this, so many tree saplings that were in the interior of this grass, that because of the environment of just leaving the center there that was dead. So you will have better chance of not having that once you rake some of that stuff out. And then okay, so then dividing every 3 to 5 years. This is a switchgrass that's in garden gallery right here outside the office. Uh, Basically, it was the entirety of this overturned dirt. That's how big it was. And when we went through our walkthrough, they said we should lift it up, divide it, and put it back in as a dinner plate size. That's that's how my predecessor liked to describe it, dinner plate size, and that will sort of reinvigorate the growth, uh, bring new life. If you've ever given a shrub a rejuvenation cutting, this is the same sort of concept. And plus, you don't want too big of a grass, especially if you're working with limited space. All right, so some problems with ornamental grasses, especially when you are handling them, like trimming them up, is that the leaf margins can be pretty abrasive on your skin. And so it's important to have uh, gloves and long sleeves. And so this is a great picture of what I'm talking about. She has gloves, she has long sleeves, and because we can't see her face, we are going to assume in our in our imagination that she is wearing safety glasses, because safety glasses are important, especially when you're dealing with something that has so much dimension. You could easily poke your eye, or if you're using shears, some of that dust particles or some of the grass clippings could get into your eye, and that's not fun. I've had that happen before. It's not fun. It kind of ruins your whole day because you have to spend 5 minutes trying to get this piece of grass out. So please, please, please wear proper PPE when handling any uh any of the grasses, especially when you're cutting them back. Seed heads can carry viable seed that can readily germinate. And that is true for a lot of our ornamental grasses. I know that there are several of the ornamental grasses that we'll cover a little bit that are listed as invasive. And there's a potentially invasive, what she's handling here, purple fountain grass, can be potentially invasive if the seed head's mature enough. So you have to sort of keep that in mind, but it all depends on, again, what effect you are wanting when you have an ornamental grass. And then the inability to distinguish between grasses. I know that some of my colleagues definitely struggle with this. Not to point the finger at anybody who's on the call, but I know that it can sort of look just like a green mass. But in this picture, I can tell you that there's 4 different grasses, and especially that one front and center, that's Johnson grass. And so a lot of times when we have our ornamental grasses, we don't realize that, some of what we're growing is just a weed, an invasive weed that we don't want. And by the time we recognize that it's a different grass, it's already dropped its seed, it's spread, or become really established to make it difficult to get rid of. And that's why, That's why it's important to understand what your grass looks like when you're planting it. Because if you didn't know that there was four in this picture, how many do you think are in this picture? I mean, this is another rain garden outside of our office. And again, I think I counted five different grasses, including some big blue stem, some prairie cord grass, some river oats, uh, and some switchgrass. And then there was several weeds in here. But when you're looking out in a mass of grasses, especially if you're looking for that prairie effect, you can sort of overlook some of the very weedy grasses that we have here in the plains. So let's get to some popular examples. First up, we got some maidenhair grass. I've mentioned it several times. Is Miscanthus sinensis. There are so many varieties out there, and I promise you, you probably have seen it, and you probably liked it, and that again, it's very popular. The seed head itself, again, has a very soft texture. We get a lot of different colors out of the leaves. As you can see in the top right, that is, it's called gold bar, but there are large, and it's actually a dwarf variety, but there are several larger varieties that get called maybe porcupine grass or zebra grass, and they have that banded coloring on their foliage. But that this is a grass that keeps its foliage or in seed head. During the winter time. Of course, it's a warm season grass and it's a perennial. But in the wintertime, that real soft texture, that really tall seed head is really it really breaks up maybe the snow that we're seeing, and so that's the real big appeal of this maidenhair grass. And then feather reed grass, again, one of our very popular varieties that we have here, especially here in Olathe. It seems like it's on every median and every street corner. But a main appeal is going to be that vertical upright growth. It stays vertical all year. Only when you cut it down, and then when you cut it down, it doesn't it's not very what do I want to say? It's not very messy when you chop it down. It's pretty easy to chop down by your hand. And so that's one of the biggest appeals of this. Columbogrossus acutifolia, which means small leaf or acute leaf. And then of course Carl Forster is I think the most popular one that you're going to find here in Kansas. It's a hybrid and it doesn't really seed too heavily. Like I don't think I've ever seen it sort of escape cultivation. But always a chance, always a chance. Not saying that it's impossible. But it is one of our cool season perennials. And again, offering a lot of vertical interests. And they come in many different colors too. Giant reedgrass. I mentioned this a little bit before in the picture above. It is a great screening privacy grass if you're trying to cover something up. Arundo donax is is the Latin name of that. Now the straight species is invasive, especially I don't think that I've found any extension that doesn't label it as invasive. However, there are plenty of cultivars that are still on the market, and they are a little bit less aggressive. The roots are going to still be there, but I think the seeds are less it's less seedy, or they don't have viable seed. And so this variegated one in the bottom picture is actually in North Carolina, in one of the demonstration gardens in I don't remember which college, but it was I think it was North Carolina State that had this grass. But it was again, it was tall, and that's the appeal of it. Some people really like the pampas grass that they see on the West Coast, especially in California. And this is sort of an alternative to that since it doesn't really grow in our zone. Now, the top picture, I don't know that it was variegated. However, I walked out all over Hope, Kansas, which is where this picture was taken, and walking all over Hope, Kansas is not that hard to do, but I didn't see it anywhere else. So I'm thinking that, that it's not necessarily as invasive as it might be in some of the other areas around the country. And then purple fountain grass and purple millet. So this is a pennisetum, a set. This is a pennisetum seed species. But it's part of the graceful grasses and proven winners. Okay. This is one of their copyrighted grasses. But we used it a lot at K-State because it's purple and the leaf size of this millet was just unbeatable. I mean, there was always used in the gardens, the KSU gardens. And then when I was working on the facilities, I would try to use it a whole bunch. It's easy as it's easy to use as a background sort of grass. And I mean, it just the purple again was so appealing to K-State. But yes, we treat these as an annual. They do not overwinter. These are zone 8 grasses. Okay, so let's move on to some native grasses and some of the benefits. I'm sure you've all seen this picture. And if you haven't, well, this is a great picture that illustrates the root systems of some of our native plants. If you look all the way to the left and you look at this line, you'll see that that is Kentucky bluegrass. This is what a lot of our cool season turf, along with tall fescue, or a mix of both of them. This is what we see in our residential spaces. And you can see that root system is not very deep. And that's why we have to water it constantly. Especially once that top couple inches dries out, you got to put another water on, or else it's going to look a different color. But as we move over to the right a little bit, we have some of our Indian grass. We have some of our porcupine grass that's not miscanthus. I had to look that one up. It's a different type of grass. And then, again, prairie cord grass, some of our big blue stem, and I think little blue stem is on here, prairie chop seed. And this is a great illustration that shows like just how deep some of the roots can grow in some of our prairie environments, especially here on the very right. This is buffalo grass, so that turf option. Just see the difference of some of these turf some of these turf options compared to our Kentucky bluegrass. So if you are interested in getting a warm season turf, I would really consider buffalo grass and blue grama for that reason. So why natives? They're well adapted to our local soil conditions and weather patterns. Once they're sort of established, again, you have to sort of water them into establishment, but they can sort of handle these long periods of drought that we have, especially here in Kansas. The temperature doesn't necessarily kill them or make them, wilt or fall over. And this bottom right photo is actually this is two little blue stems that are right next to each other. And you can see one on the right is kind of blue, and the one on the right left is kind of green, and the one on the left is just actually closer to an area where there's a lot of rain runoff, and then also the tree above it sort of drips down right there on top of it, and so it doesn't necessarily need to turn blue, but once it does sort of dry up in the soil profile, we have this blue hue that we start to see, and again, probably where it gets its name. And that's an adaptation that it has. But if you were to put a gallon of water in that spot, you would see this start to green up again. Um, and then of course, it feeds it supports our native wildlife. In the top right, we have a Virginia, gosh, it was Virginia hawk moth, or as a caterpillar, it's called like a woolly bear. If you've ever heard of woolly bear caterpillars, and it it feeds on a variety of things, but one of the things it does feed on is our native grasses. And so I took this one. It is outside of Chicago Botanical Gardens in the Dixon Prairie, where there's a lot of this mixed prairie plantings. And then, of course, this picture in the background is actually in the Flint Hills, right outside of Manhattan. And you can sort of see this is late fall, and I don't think that we had gotten rain recently, but it's still like green, it's still lush, everything's looking really good. And that's true of a lot of our pastures in Kansas. And then one tidbit I would like to throw out there is that in our pastures, maybe you are love to burn your pastures in April. I know that a lot of people really love to see the fire take across the field and watch it green back up again. But I would also challenge you that when I was in Oakley, we were visiting Western Kansas, and we were at this bison farm. And one of the things that this bison farm does was help the lesser prairie chicken, the lesser, like a conservation program. And so one of the things he told us was that this is some side oats grama, which is very common out in the shortgrass prairie. But the lesser prairie chicken will actually nest under this nest under year-old grass. So like leaving the foliage would be sort of beneficial to some of our wildlife, because there's not a lot of cover out in Western Kansas, and so they will find cover where they can, and that would be like this year-old tuft of grass. And so there was a lot of that we're seeing out in the pastures, and it might be too dry to sort of set that on fire, but this would be something that you could do if you sort of live north of the uh, anywhere north of the Arkansas River is sort of the range of their habitat. And you can this isn't just for lesser prairie chickens, but I know that pheasant and quail sort of nest on the ground, and providing a little bit of habitat by not taking away that foliage after the year could be beneficial to them. So a couple of specifics. One of our very popular grasses, especially to use in a residential landscape, is little blue stem, Schizocrinum scoparium. Schizocrinum scoparium. It's a warm season grass, a perennial grass. I found that I think this is maybe a little low, but I know it supports at least 11 native pollinators. A lot of them skipper butterflies, like a ton of skipper butterflies. The butterfly larva will actually eat the foliage. I know that it is a habitat and a food source for some of our birds. I know that the quail like to eat the seeds of this little blue stem, and so again, are you going to do that in your residential your residential area? Going to have your quail in your flower bed? Probably not, but I know that there's sparrows everywhere, and they will definitely use this as a habitat when they're especially trying to get away from maybe the cold wind. So there's a ton of varieties out there. You can see the top left picture is what it would look like in the fall. It has this really nice red hue to it. And that's one of the appeals of our native grasses, that you have this fantastic fall color that some of maybe our variegated maidenhairs don't necessarily have. Next up, we have Indian grass, Sorghastrum nutans. Uh, it is a upright grass, and if you wanted a native option that sort of looked like feather reed grass, I would go with this one. It is very upright, has sort of a similar flower head. The thing is, it will seed out and it will have viable seed because it is a native grass, and it's very adapted to this area. Here's a picture of, again, that winter interest I keep talking about. This is, in February after a snow. And again, if you didn't have this, you're sort of looking at a snow barren wasteland. So a snow-covered barren wasteland. So that winter interest is pretty important if you have like a lot of snowfall in your area, or maybe you just don't want to look at, your dead turf all the time in the winter. This grass specifically is I think I found that it supports at least 4 butterfly species. Again, a lot of them skipper butterflies. Salt and pepper skipper was on there. And then it's habitat for ground nesting birds, and you can sort of see how that foliage can sort of be a nice cover for our ground dwelling birds. Prairie dropseed, another one of our very popular grasses. I think you can find this almost every retailer nowadays. Now there's a plenty of varieties that are, tall, short, mounded. Some that have a lot, more. They hang on to their flower seeds a lot longer to give you more of that interest. But it's a very nice soft grass. That it works great in any low environment. And again, we saw that picture before. It has really long roots. And you can't beat that environmental impact with a lot of our with turf even. So if you were ever to try out a native grass, I would go with this one. Your neighbors will love it, and your neighbors will ask you, where did you get that grass? And what kind of grass is that? And I like that. I know that it makes a native makes you into a native nut once you start getting into some of these native grasses. Blue grama. Like I said before, this one is a very common grass out in our short grass prairie. It's eyelash grass. Oh, it's a warm season grass, can be used as turf. I know that it's a host plant for at least 13 butterflies. And it's a great small grass, can take a bit of traffic, and that's why we use it for turf. Especially out in pastures where there's a lot of blue grama, it's like you're walking on grass. It really is nice. Now, if you were to use it as turf, I'd bring attention to the seed heads that are bent sideways, and that's why we call it eyelash grass. That's something you would have to sort of mow off to sort of keep it attractive in maybe an HOA setting. But you can use it as a specimen plant, especially like in pots. This would be a great addition if you wanted to have a nice pot of native plants outside your house. Here we have down at the bottom Blonde Ambition, which is a cultivar. It really focuses. It's still green, but however the tips of the leaves kind of sort of fade into a blonde color to sort of match the seed heads, and that's why that's where it got its name. And it's a fantastic grass if you want to just have a couple of these around as a massing effect. This would be a really good massing effect that would be great for like a foreground situation. And then I think that is all I have for you, and I think I'm on time too. Yes. So yes, I'm now opening it up to questions. Please drop them in the chat, or drop them in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer some of them.
Nice job, Marcus. We do have some questions for you that came in the Q&A. So this first one, and this is one we've had in Reno County. They work for a municipality, and they've got a resident who's planted pretty much their entire lawn to look like a miniature prairie, which is not in their their guidelines or their nuisance code. So is there any way you recommend handling that?
I know that here in Johnson County, I know that the Overland Park government actually sort of made it so that you can start doing some more of those plantings in your yard and have more of those what were historically invasive plants, which are just really aggressive seeding plants that we can't use for foraging. But are you asking if you need more or how to get it yourself or how to?
I think from their aspect, they're asking how to not really regulate that, but how to deal with somebody wanting to plant their lawn as opposed to just a traditional turf grass lawn to make it more of a prairie look. How I know for us, in our Sandhills area, I've had some homeowners want to do that, and I always recommend they still need to manage it and maintain it because it can become a fire hazard too when it's
Oh, yes.
tall
Oh, yes,
grass up
yes.
by, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Definitely, if you have a lot of dead plant material near your structures, it is going to be a fire hazard, especially if you live in an area that doesn't have like a lot of water. I know anything sort of west of Topeka doesn't get a lot of water. And so I would recommend that, in the early spring, you can still cut it down again and cut a lot of the stuff down with the mower, even if it's really low growing, or you get your nice shears out there, your sharp shears, and bag it up and take it to a designated area that's outside of your residential property. I know that a lot of municipalities carry out yard waste, and this is I would take advantage of that. But if it's I mean, I love the prairie look, and I think that it uses less water. And I wish more people would be open to it. But I understand that there's some hazards that go along with that.
There were a few questions about some grasses being invasive and what's the best way to avoid that.
I would first of all do some research with if you go to if you just sort of type in a couple of these grasses and sort of see if they're listed as invasive anywhere. I know that it might be a different sort of environment that sort of triggers them to have a viable seed. And so I would try to, do a little background on, again, because it is a big commitment, getting an ornamental grass. I would try to just look up, see if it does have invasive potential or it's listed invasive anywhere, and maybe look up to see what sort of conditions make it that way. Because not all grasses are, as much as I've seen miscanthus, I've gotten miscanthus to germinate. However, I've never seen it grow wild out or escape cultivation out in the landscape. So I would just, if you're worried about it, cut off the seed heads, one of the most attractive parts of the plant.
Okay, here's one. The purple millets and the fountain grasses, the purple fountain grass that are annuals. What's the best way to handle those in the fall?
So Proven Winners, straight from their website, says that once it starts browning, it's just okay to just rip it out. But like I said before, with the asterisks about fertilization, if you rip out the roots and rip out the foliage and you don't necessarily want to compost that or whatever, you're sort of depleting your flower bed or your landscape of some nutrients that it took up. And so once it turns brown, you can get rid of it, that's fine. But you can also sort of keep it to have that sort of form. It's just going to look brown, and it wasn't chosen because it had good winter interests. Let's just put it that way. It doesn't have that sort of appeal. Yeah.
Then there are a lot of questions about grasses that will take some shade. Some of the ornamentals and some of the natives.
Right. And I wish I was trying to really make sure that I was in that time limit because, oh man, there's a lot of good native. Well, there's a handful of good natives that are great for shade. I know that first grass on my slide, it was that on the aesthetics page, it was Japanese forest grass. And that one is a great cultivated ornamental grass. It doesn't necessarily have it doesn't really seed that much from my understanding, but there are several native options like bottle brush grass, what is it? Wild Canada rye, and of course a lot of our sedges. Don't overlook sedges. I didn't touch on sedges because this is about grasses, but they still give you that sort of appeal, that aesthetic appeal. And I know that there's several sedges that are listed on one of the resources that I had you drop in the chat.
And then there were questions about recommendations for areas that can get some flooding or get wet, but most of the time they're dry if they're grasses that can tolerate both conditions.
Yes. One of the grasses that I didn't get to highlight, but it's one of our big native grasses, is the big blue stem, our Andrew Progon grass. It gets really tall, and there's several varieties that, the more water you give it, the bigger it gets. But also when it dries down, it's not, I mean, it doesn't shrink, but but it will be able to handle a lot of those dry spells that we have here in the Midwest. So it really, I would go with the native option. Definitely a native option, because out here, we'll have a couple, of long periods of dryness out in the landscape, and the river oats does well, the prairie cordgrass does well, and the especially that are in the rain garden. So they get flooded in the springtime, but in the heat of the summer they do dry up. So I would try to go with the native option if you were having those issues with the flooding.
We've got a few other questions. I'm going to ask you one more so we don't go over time, but any grasses, native grasses, ornamental grasses that are good for wildlife?
Yes. Like I said, the Indian grass was one of those things that it's great for. I think one of the resources that I looked up, it was saying that the pheasants, ringneck pheasants, they like to hide in tufts of Indian grass. But any one of our sort of native grasses that you leave some of the foliage like for cover, especially in maybe right next to a pasture land, you're going to see a lot of those birds sort of flock to that. I know that if they have a very a seedy seed head, some of our golden finches will eat the seeds. If you've ever seen like a yellow top on some of our upright grasses, that's probably a golden finch. So again, native grasses are going to be what provide the most benefit to our native wildlife.
And we didn't get to all the questions, but we will post resources on when we get the video posted, and feel free to email us as well. So we're going to turn this over to Laura. Thanks, Markis.
Thanks, Markis and Pam, for that. We do typically have more questions than we've got time for, but we'll be sure to link several articles related to this session on our website, like Pam said. We hope that these resources will answer any questions you may have, but if you still need additional information, please contact your local K-State Extension office. Once again, thank you for joining K-State Garden Hour series hosted by K-State Research and Extension. We were so glad that you could be here today to learn about native and ornamental grasses in Kansas with Markis Hill. You can visit the K-State Garden Hour website to view a recording of this and other garden hours, or to make a tax-deductible donation to support the continuation of this webinar series. This session was recorded and we'll post it on the website by tomorrow afternoon. After this webinar ends today, you'll receive a prompt to take an evaluation survey. And please do fill this out. We do really appreciate that feedback and we read through all of it. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at gardenhour@ksu.edu. Thank you again, and we hope that you continue to tune in each month. Have a great week.